Hello, welcome to my channel, or welcome back. I hope you're all doing well today. I'm picking up on a very specific energy today, and this is of someone who feels like damaged goods. Like someone who feels like they're maybe not desirable, or because of the things that they've experienced, they don't really fit into the world. And the guidance that I'm getting from Spirit is actually that you're more like a hidden gem or like a diamond in the rough. So let's pull some cards and get into this energy. Alright, so we have the Three of Cups here. And this is a feeling of celebration and three feminine figures coming together in this garden that is looking very autumnal. And what I get the sense is that there's some sort of celebration of like the seasons of your life. So maybe there was this feeling that in the past there was this kind of darkness or this phase where you went through a lot of trials. And I feel like this could be seen as sort of like the winter of your life, maybe. But I feel like you're entering a new season of your life that feels more like a harvest and this feeling of really reaping the rewards for these trials that you've had to face. Because yes, it was a long, dark, cold winter, but I feel like you're coming out of it now into this feeling of being able to relax a little bit more and enjoy things and yeah, like reap your rewards and like celebrate, eat grapes and drink wine in this symbolic way of like maybe in the past it was this like suffering where maybe you were really lonely or you felt kind of isolated in some way, or there was this feeling of like the things that you had gone through were really unique, where maybe you couldn't talk to a lot of people about them because not that many people have been through this. And it felt like you were maybe like isolated from society at large in a way. Like you couldn't really get into what everyone else was feeling when they were celebrating. Like almost this feeling of being behind a pane of glass and watching everyone else from a distance. But I feel like the next phase of your life, or the current phase of your life, is going to be one where you are actively taking part in the celebrations. And maybe even if you had like physically been able to do these things that would have brought other people joy or made them celebrate, like with the dancing, enjoying a drink, or eating grapes, like it didn't actually bring you that level of pleasure because of this feeling that you had of something being impaired within you, within your ability to enjoy the human experience. But I feel like that's definitely changing right now. And these same things that maybe didn't used to bring you pleasure and made you feel like you were left out of something are now going to give you this fuller experience where you really feel like you are enjoying things to their utmost capability. All right, we have the Page of Pentacles here. And so this is the feeling of there being something new being delivered to you. Again, with like in relation to the material world, where I think like maybe before you had almost a strained relationship to it, where it felt like everything in your material world seemed to bring you suffering in some way, or it didn't bring you pleasure. Like you were just lacking the ability to truly connect with it. So I'm getting this feeling of like someone who felt really disconnected from their body, or maybe like really disconnected from other people as well, or again disconnected from like these physical pleasures that one might feel, and like everyday pleasures as well. Like it's not necessarily relating to something too hedonistic, but more just like being able to take pleasure in the small things in life, like the pleasure in eating a meal every day and like watching the sunrise, or the sensation of like sunlight shining on your skin, or even not even necessarily positive sensations, like maybe something like the cold of the winter air, like something like that, where it's like more like a neutral experience but of our physical form, and just not really feeling connected to that in any way in the past. But I feel like there is this sense of newness where you feel newly connected to that side of yourself. All right, we have the Ten of Swords here. So this is really accurate to this past energy that I'm talking about, of like really feeling like damaged, wounded, and undesirable, kind of left alone, left out in the cold. And so I feel like there was maybe this phase in your life where it almost felt like you were really being attacked in many ways, of like just so many swords being stabbed into you, like an excessive amount of them. So I feel like maybe in the past you almost suffered disproportionately in this way that, like, what I'm getting is like almost like a martyr or like a saint. Maybe you suffered these blows that were like disproportionate to the amount of suffering that the average person might experience, and I feel like it almost unlocked something new in you, where it was almost this kind of like a spiritual awakening, perhaps in some ways, where you got connected to this different side of the human psyche that when you're exposed to so much suffering, and it could have been physical suffering, or it could have been just like a mental, emotional suffering, or it could have been a combination of the two that maybe played off of each other, that when you got to this point, it was almost like this breaking point or this breakthrough I'm getting where you almost crossed through to another side. And I feel like, of course, this is not the end of your journey. This was maybe like almost an initiation into this new way of being, where I feel like almost at the beginning it felt like, yeah, like a wound, or that something, it was removing you from human society. So then I feel like after this point, you were kind of working in this other way where you felt apart from other people, but this was when you felt like damaged goods. Like after this trial that you faced, you felt so different from other people because of this initiation that you had experienced, where maybe you wouldn't have thought of it in those terms. Maybe you would have just thought of it as, like I mentioned, of like being damaged goods or just being really different or being wounded. But really, what this was an initiation. And then in this period of life, yeah, like I mentioned, you just felt really different from other people. But then afterwards, there's this a new way of coming back to the human experience after experiencing this hardship. And like I mentioned, reconnecting to your physical body and feeling safe in your body again. And this is bringing you a whole new perspective, because not only do you have that strong connection to your physical body, but you've also had that experience of being removed from it and having to dissociate to deal with pain and like emotional pain, and not being able to exist in your body. And these two different perspectives have almost strengthened your ability to exist in the world, because now you have this almost removed outsider kind of spiritual view of things, but then you also have been able to come back into your body and be grounded again. All right, I have the Ace of Wands. So I feel like this is someone who is maybe more powerful than they think. And it could be because they're just discovering the beginning of these powers, or didn't really understand the full extent of their capabilities. And like I mentioned, this is someone who is, yeah, like they felt previously like a diamond in the rough. So it almost felt like they didn't really believe in themselves, or maybe they had been told that they were not capable of certain things. And so maybe they neglected to hone some of their abilities for a long time. And so the sense I'm getting is that this is someone who has just started to maybe see different sides of themselves and different capabilities that they thought they didn't have in the past. And so I feel like there is this feeling of intentional work now being put in. Like I mentioned with the diamond in the rough, it's like there does take some polishing of the stone, or like how the diamond is cut into a specific shape, where I think maybe in the past, like I mentioned, you really didn't feel confident, or you felt like incapable, or you felt really wounded. But now I think you're starting to realize that there is that gem of possibility within you, and there is that diamond in the rough, and now it's the stage where you're putting that intentional effort in order to create that sort of like a final object or a final form, is what I'm getting. And so I think before you didn't understand that you had to work on it in this way because you were led to believe that that didn't exist within you. And now that you realize that there is that gem within you, it's the stage of starting to work on it. All right, we have the Chariot. Okay, so I feel like this is someone who is really moving forward in their life, where, like I mentioned, in this past feeling where you felt like damaged goods or you felt very wounded, it was almost like maybe you were stagnant or maybe moving backward or not really making any progress. But I feel like with this Chariot energy and this newer energy that you're entering into, it's this feeling of moving ahead and really making progress. And also like something that was very guarded in the past, where there was, yeah, like there was something being kept from you, where I think maybe you felt this kind of resentment about the fact that you were in this state for so long, of feeling really damaged and feeling isolated from the rest of society. But I feel like, again, there's just like, this was for a reason, of like these experiences that you had because of this trauma, and then the experiences that you had after returning back to your body after a long period of feeling disconnected from it. Like there's some secret knowledge, is what I'm getting, contained within this experience that not everyone is let into. And it's like almost like you it's almost like this is a gift that you're being granted for solving the mystery or interrogating the mystery of why these things would happen to you. So I feel like there was this really long period in your life maybe where you were asking like, why did this happen? And like why would God punish me this way? Or like just like what was I meant to learn from this experience? And I feel like this long period of meditating on this question of the mystery of your suffering, of like why would this happen to someone, and specifically why would this happen to me, has actually granted you sort of a new answer to this riddle, I guess. But again, it's something that you might not be able to put into words exactly because it is such a mystery, and these great mysteries in our world, like the mystery of death and birth or the mystery of love, these are things that can't be put into any simple sentence or even a volume of 10 books. But at the same time, it is a mystery that we can solve piece by piece, but like very fragmentary pieces and like a really vague feeling of like when you work towards it, it's just something that you can't put into words, but you are making progress on it. And I think that this mystery of your suffering is something that you've made a lot of progress on in comparison to other people, and it is giving you some sort of benefit in this world, even if it's so vague and so hard to put your finger on. All right, we have the Six of Wands. A really strong leadership quality from this energy, where, like I mentioned, is that this thing that you've gone through is a trial that's very unique to you, and not a lot of people have gone through it. And I think this really sets you apart from the crowd. Like you can see this card, the figure in the front is elevated from the rest of the crowd who's walking on foot, and this person is walking on or they're riding on a horse, and their wand is decorated with a wreath, unlike the other figures. So it's this feeling of being set apart from the crowd and being lifted up to this position of leadership, where I feel like, again, like I mentioned, like you really felt maybe less than other people, like damaged goods, like no one wants you. And it was this feeling of like in the suffering, that's really where you felt at your lowest point, of just feeling like the worst person or the most undesirable person. But I feel like this extreme where you bounced back from that and really reconnected to your body and your sense of self has now elevated you above the crowd. These people who haven't had to face these trials, like, yes, they've faced other trials on their own, but one must admit that the suffering that you've gone through in some ways has been greater than the average person, and this has imbued you with new qualities in relation to leadership and your ability to work with other people and respond to conflicts and respond to crises as well, where because you've had to face these crises and suffering for a very extended period of time, it's sort of granted you with this new ability to respond to it in a way that maybe at the time it felt like disconnection, and it felt like maybe some sort of detachment, and it maybe wasn't healthy fully at the time, but it was like maybe you had no other choice but to do that because like you would have maybe mentally broken completely if you had faced it in the moment. But I think this long period of reconciling these experiences you had and then coming back to your body and then kind of being able to think about like what would I have done differently, or analyzing how you reacted in that situation, I feel like this has granted you a sort of a new power when it comes to leadership and dealing with crises, where now you can become much more level-headed and calm in these situations, where it's almost like you can switch into that mode of like being detached and looking at things from an outsider view instead of panicking. But at the same time, you maintain this really strong connection to your body and your sense of self, so that you haven't fully lost touch with either side. And the fact that you're in touch with both sides of yourself, of this more detached outsider perspective as well as your human perspective, has granted you just a new ability that has made you a really valuable person in this world, and like I mentioned, like a hidden gem, or maybe more like a diamond in the rough, because maybe it'll take some time for you to work on these qualities in yourself, as well as working on just the time that it takes in order for your potential to be realized in the world, where I am really getting this strong sense of frustration of like, I think maybe because you've overcome this hurdle, you kind of want everything to be easy now. And it's like, I face my challenge, like, where's the reward now? But I'm also getting the sense that there is this feeling of like waiting or patience associated with that, of like, you will get your comeuppance in a way, or like you will get your due reward in time. But there is this feeling of patience required. And like I mentioned, like the polishing of a stone, it's not something that can happen overnight. Like if you've ever polished rocks in a rock tumbler, I think is what it's called, and you put in all these strange materials with the rocks, and it makes a slurry that polishes them smooth, and it really brings out the color of the natural rock. It's a process that takes many days, and it's like this very slow process replicating what would happen in nature of like rocks that are swept along by the tides. And so that's what I'm kind of getting, is like there is this natural process happening in you that would polish this stone that is the gem of the self. And you could allow this process to work on its own and you would get quite far in your life. But I feel like when you apply a conscious pressure, like in the example of the mechanical rock tumbler, you're getting to that point a little bit faster. And I feel like what this experience where you have suffered and bounced back has shown you is that you've learned the conscious ability of being able to do this. All right, we have the Ace of Pentacles here. So there is this feeling of being offered this, again, like this initiation into a garden where things just are a little bit more peaceful for you in a way, where I feel like it may have seemed like the suffering was your greatest wound, and like the thing that might have, like, maybe some people would say would ruin their life. But in fact, this was your invitation into this sort of new way of being, or kind of like a new club in a way, is what I'm getting. Is like the people who have suffered the same way and bounced back from it are now kind of seeing you as one of their kin in a way. And it's like this feeling of understanding each other, and like, yeah, like kinship, and a strong sense of joy and familiarity and like celebration, because of the fact that we've all overcome our battles together, and we really know what it takes to get to this point of having gone to the darkest places in ourselves, like those really low dark places where you'd even consider it to be like hell on earth, or yeah, just like really deep, dark, terrible realms. And then being able to crawl back out of it, and maybe even you've done this more than once, is you've gone to this really dark place and clawed your way out again and again. And it is a strength and this power that it takes to come back from those depths, and you're bringing back like a side of this darkness with you, where it's almost like you carry it with you. And like I mentioned, is like, I feel like maybe people could see this in you. It's like you do stand apart from the crowd because of this darkness that you carry with you. And it could be like, it feels like it's your greatest wound, but it's also your greatest strength. Because it does take a lot of courage to go to these places and come back from it. All right, and then we have the Ten of Pentacles here. And this is this feeling of partaking in some sort of yeah, like a long process, because in this card we have the child, we have adults, and then we have an elderly man, and then there's also two dogs here. And so this is this feeling of yeah, like being a part of society and understanding your own personal journey and seeing the journeys that other people go through, where I think maybe you're someone who really looks up to a lot of people who are older and more experienced than you. And maybe this feeling of like ambition, or like, I wish I could be like them, or they really inspire me. And I think you're starting to realize now that you are one of those people, and you're going to become that person who inspires others. And I think what you don't even realize is that you're already inspiring other people. Like, as you can see, there's the child on this card here, where you might feel like you really feel lost, confused, wounded, and damaged. But what you don't understand is that there's a whole new generation of people younger than you who are looking up to you and thinking like, you're the coolest person ever, like, you know everything, I want to be like you one day. And they're really like inspired by your talent and the things that you share with the world. And I feel like you're starting to realize now, like, putting yourself on that spectrum of seeing that there are people who inspire you and there's people who are inspired by you, and understanding that you're exactly where you need to be. And you don't need to have this feeling of like, I feel behind, or I feel like, yeah, like I felt like held back from these things that have traumatized me or wounded me. But understanding that actually these trials that you faced are what get you ahead on that track of like growing into this more mature person. And so, in fact, you should be willing to face the side of yourself who has suffered with like a lot of grace and compassion, rather than this feeling of like shame, guilt, or remorse, where maybe you previously looked back on these experiences that you had, or while you were experiencing them, like, yeah, like really feeling really bad about yourself and feeling like because I've suffered in this way, like maybe it makes me a bad person, or I'm never going to recover from this, or no one else will like me because of the things that I've been through. And I feel like now you're moving into a more compassionate side where you're understanding that your trials made you who you are as a person, and they've taught you so many lessons. And it's this really strong feeling of like pride almost, or like, yeah, like kind of just being proud of yourself for being able to come out of that dark hole where, like, I'm sure you've seen people who have kind of been lost to the darkness. And I feel like you're someone who didn't get lost in the darkness. Like, you came back from it. And so you should really be proud of yourself and feel confident because of the ability that you had that is actually really rare and can honestly, yeah, like I feel like you really got close at points where it really felt like you might have almost lost it. And by it, I mean perhaps your sanity or perhaps your life. And I feel like you maybe didn't give yourself enough grace for the gravity of that, of understanding like how much strength it had to like come back from the ledge in a sense. But I feel like now that you're kind of putting yourself in that spectrum of understanding that you have so much more life to live, I think you're maybe becoming a little bit more understanding of like what a blessing it was that you were able to come back. All right, we have the world. So there's this feeling of like this infinite kind of stretching out, of finding your place in the world or kind of floating within it, where I feel like, again, like maybe you felt kind of closed off from it before, like almost this feeling of like I'm separate from the world and I'm kind of watching things through this pane of glass. But I think more recently you're starting to understand that you're able to participate in the dance of life and like show up to it and really get a lot of pleasure from it and enjoy participating in this grander experience that maybe you felt isolated from or shut off from previously. But now you're understanding that you actually have, you've been given a ticket, a special invitation to this dance just for you. And in fact, you've been initiated into it in a way where you're almost like a guest of honor in a way because of these experiences that you faced and the fact that you passed these trials in a way where instead of giving into the darkness or allowing these experiences to make you embittered and cynical, you've chosen to feel optimistic and like there's this desire in you to be a gem who is not just a hidden gem anymore, but you want to be a found gem and you want to show that off to the world. And I feel like this is something that makes you, like I mentioned, like a guest of honor is what I'm getting, is like you're almost elevated to this new position. And it's not that there's necessarily any sense of superiority or like you're better than anyone necessarily, but maybe like like a little bit, as in you have these new skills that a lot of other people don't have. And I think that there's kind of this natural hierarchy that people fall into where they're willing to admire and acknowledge your leadership abilities and the things that you've learned from this darkness that the majority of people aren't willing to face. And there's almost this respect and like reverence for you is what I'm getting, and like admiration. Not to inflate your ego too much, but this is just the sense that I'm getting. I mean, it is kind of true, and I think, you know, even for yourself, maybe you realize that there's people in this world who have faced a lot of hardship, and again, like you look up to them, you really admire them for coming back from that and facing their difficulties with so much grace and so much strength and the compassion that they hold for themselves, especially because it can be really hard to admit the things that you've been through and like genuinely the admiration that it takes, the admiration for the strength that it takes to face these most horrible things that have happened to you and be willing to admit just like verbally, or even on a like mental level of like, yes, this happened to me. Like that takes so much strength to like not live in denial, and I think you're starting to understand that for yourself. Alright, let's draw one more card. We have the moon here. Oh my gosh, again, the two dogs that showed up on this Ten of Pentacles card. And there's this feeling of, yeah, like participation, where like I think you've kind of now found your place in the world and you've kind of found your kin, where like I mentioned previously, like you really felt like you stood out from the world and you felt really isolated and alone. But now I think you're starting to realize that there's other people in the world who've also been through this level of trial and they really get it and they understand you and they have this kindness and compassion for you that maybe other people didn't have. Like I mentioned with this damaged goods feeling, maybe it felt like you genuinely were being discriminated against, or like people kind of gave you a hard time for the things that you've been through, or they just didn't get it. Like maybe they were a little bit dismissive of like, oh, it's really not that bad. Like you really suffered that badly from this. But I think now you're starting to meet people who understand like, yes, that thing that happened to you was genuinely life-threateningly horrible and like such a torturous experience. So it's actually so incredible that you came back from that. And I think you're just starting to meet people who have faced these battles as well and come back to it. And I think the reason why you're only meeting these people now is that, like yourself, they went through this long period of feeling really rejected by society or feeling held back by their wounds, where maybe they isolated themselves from society in a way as well, or they were maybe like caught up in relationships where they were maintaining this dynamic where the people around them were treating them like damaged goods because that reinforced the mental image that they had of themselves. And I feel like when people overcome this restrictive self-image and acknowledge themselves as someone who really has potential in this world, that's when they kind of come out of their shell and they rejoin society. And like I mentioned, I feel like there's this collective right now who is rejoining society after having this experience of really intense suffering and then the ensuing isolation. So I feel like you and this collective of people are now all coming together and being able to find each other and like have this really delightful experience of howling at the moon together. So I feel like you shouldn't despair if you felt like you were really alone in this, because I think there's a lot of other people in the world who have experienced a really similar trajectory in their lives, and I think that there's this sense of mutual understanding between all these people and this willingness to welcome each other, nurture each other, and like I mentioned, like develop this diamond in the rough into something that can be discovered and showed off to the world. Like I think that there's something about you that really demands and deserves to be witnessed by society at large and to be admired and celebrated. And I think that you're now just getting to this point in your life where finally it will be celebrated. So I think that if you felt like in the past there was some I just dropped so many cards. I feel like if in the past there was this wound in you and this feeling of just not being enough, I think you're letting that go entirely and you're starting to realize that you do have so much potential, and in fact almost like more potential because of the hardships that you faced and the fact that you faced them with such grace and gentleness and just confidence in yourself of knowing that you would make it out the other end. Alright, well thank you so much for watching. I hope that this video was somewhat enjoyable or helpful to you in some way, and as always I hope to see you in the next one.